And now I'm going to start letting reporters in.
So we kind of already.
Morning, everyone. We're going to give it about one more minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's go ahead. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Mangasser Savage, and I am Strategic Litigation Counsel with Public Counsel. Last night, Public Counsel, Morrison Foerster, and the California Tribal Families Coalition sued the Trump administration on behalf of the McKinleyville Union School District, challenging the Department of Education's non-continuation of federal grants to provide desperately needed mental health supports at schools within the district. McKinleyville is a rural school district in Humboldt County, California. 58% of youth in Humboldt County have experienced traumatic events like abuse or homelessness. By high school, more than 1 in 5 have considered suicide. Many of the county's students are members of Native communities who have been harmed over many generations by the federal government. With just one counselor for its 850 students, McKinleyville relied on its grant to hire additional mental health providers and offer critically needed mental health supports to its students. The Trump administration's Department of Education took none of this into account when it decided not to continue McKinleyville's grant, nor did it review the district's grant performance at all. Instead, it sent a boilerplate letter to hundreds of districts across the country stating that their grants would be discontinued due to shifting political priorities. The administration's unilateral and arbitrary actions make plain its indifference to the lasting harms its decisions are inflicting on high poverty rural communities, including here in the state of California. Today, we'll hear from the superintendent of McKinleyville. We'll hear from the director of social services at one of the Native communities in the county with students in the McKinleyville School District, and then we'll open up and answer questions. This lawsuit is going to be seeking an injunction forcing the federal government to comply with its own regulations and not to leave these kids behind just because of its shifting political priorities. Thank you. I'm going to now pass it over to Julie Giannini-Previde, the superintendent of the McKinleyville Union School District.
Thank you, Amanda. I guess I want to start by just saying that I am really proud to serve the students of McKinleyville, and I appreciate, Amanda, your focus on the rural nature of where our kids live. We applied for the school-based mental health grant and were notified that we got this 5-year grant. We were able to hire 5 folks to support our students. It's been just the most amazing opportunity to be able to serve our kids who need this support. As you mentioned, we serve kids who live in a rural area, who experience poverty and a high level of adverse childhood experiences. So one of the most important pieces for us is the fact that our students don't have access to mental health care in our communities. The next largest city is a 6-hour drive away. And for many of our students, that might as well be across the globe, in terms of transportation and families who can get them to the places they need to be. So being able to provide these services within our schools was just a gift. We did everything that the federal government asked of us, and now our funding's gone, and we're looking at a cliff of having to fire all of these folks who provide these really vital services to our kids. I want to focus too on the fact that for many of our kids, the place they go for all of their services, for safety, for food, for mental health support, is the school. We live in a rural community. There are not a lot of services available in other places, and we are a hub for our families and for our students. And losing this level of support for our kids could literally be a case of life or death for some of our students.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, and now I'd like to turn it over to Angie Sundberg, who is the Director of Social Services at Trinidad Rancheria.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angela Sundberg. My last name is Sundberg. I am the Social Services Director for Trinidad Rancheria. We do host 2 therapists in our office, and so losing this funding is going to not only put a bigger burden on our already overburdened staff of 2. It's going to affect our kids in such a huge way. In Humboldt County, there's already a lack of mental health services and access to mental health services. If we go through the county, it takes like 2 months to even, if we can get through the door, it'll take at least 2 months to get our kids services. Whether that is going to be a person who our kids are able to connect with is even less of a opportunity. To have the in-school opportunity to be able to go have our kids be seen is literally the way that our kids are able to access mental health. And so to take that away is going to be detrimental for our youth. In Humboldt County, our youth are, Native people stem from the generational trauma from leading back to boarding schools. And so the kids, the parents and the grandparents that came out of boarding schools are the reasons why we are experiencing a lot of the trauma that we continue to face, and what the government did to Native people to put us into the position where we are, where we're experiencing the trauma of sexual abuse, where we're experiencing the trauma of neglect and abuse and physical abuse and addiction. All stems back from the generational trauma leading back to the boarding schools and what the government did to Native people. So finding somebody who is going to be able to focus and have that education on where our kids are coming from is even more important too. And McKinleyville understands where our Native population comes from. There are 8 federally recognized tribes in California, or in Humboldt County, sorry. And there's a lot of education to schools from the tribes, and a lot of collaboration that we do with the schools that allow for better education and better services to our kids. And so if this is our opportunity to get our kids the mental health that they need, and now it's no longer there, it's going to literally be life or death for sure, like Julie said.
Thank you, Angela. And I just wanted to underscore a couple of points that you made. One of which I think a big emphasis in our complaint is just the recognition that these mental health services and supports, they're not supplemental, right? They're necessary for children in McKinleyville to be able to access education on an equal footing, right? Because when you have adverse childhood experiences, when you do experience this trauma, it impacts your ability to learn if you are not able to cope with that and if you do not have the supports to cope with that. And the reality is, in a district as rural as McKinleyville, the place where you are going to get those supports, as both Julie and Angie said, is at school. And what's so troubling in this case, as I mentioned before, is that the Trump administration isn't taking any of this into account, right? It's issuing a boilerplate letter because it disagrees with the prior administration's political priorities, right? It's a purely sort of ideological disagreement that takes into account nothing unique to the school district, unique to the children here, unique to the tribes that are present in this county. And it's so troubling for many reasons, but that is near the top of the list. So at this point, what I'd like to do is open it up to questions. I will be basically fielding the questions between myself, Julie, and Angie, but feel free to ask about whatever you'd like, and we'll do our best to answer.
Hi,
Eric.
this is Eric with Politico. I'm curious, how much funding is at stake here?
Mhm. Julie, do you want to take that one, and I can also support?
Yeah, so the initial grant awarded was $7.2 million over 5 years. And there is approximately, we received funding for the first year, but that has been discontinued as of December 31st of this year. So 4 years left of that grant has been discontinued.
And the Department of Education did announce they would sort of allow new applications for this grant, I believe earlier this month. Do you plan to reapply for it?
In speaking with our grant support, our county grant support, we don't qualify under the new recompete. Additionally, the new grant only provides awards up to 1.7 million over 4 years.
I'd like to speak to that as well, which is the reason that McKinleyville does not qualify is because of the number of students, right? And so I think that that just shows how out of touch this administration is with the nature of rural communities, right? There are few students in McKinleyville by nature of it being in a remote and isolated area of California, and that actually increases the need. And so to say, well, you don't have enough students to need or to merit these services is to ignore the very nature of a rural community and of its needs. And so absolutely, it is not a replacement. Even if McKinleyville did qualify, it is a grant of a lower amount of funds. And I guess what I really want to emphasize here is that we're not suing for funds. We are suing to force the Department of Education to act in accordance with the statutes that were passed by Congress and the regulations that govern its actions. And it has wholesale ignored that in order to just cut off any programs that it believes conflict with this current administration's political priorities. And that's just not the law in California or in the United States.
So you don't qualify because of the number of students, you said?
That is my understanding.
is there a limit? Is there a requirement that there's a certain number of students to apply for it?
There's a ratio of students to staff. Yeah.
Mm. And then just sorry, just following up on the funding at stake. So the 4 years left of the grant. Do you know how much money around that would be?
I believe it's just over 5 million.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. Are there other questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Griffin.
Hello. Hi, my name's Griffin. I'm with a local publication in Humboldt County, the North Coast Journal. I was wondering, since you guys are losing a little over 5 million in funding, does either the McKinleyville Unified School District or Trinidad Rancheria's schools, is there a sort of kind of plan B in place or that has been discussed now that you're losing that funding? Are you guys kind of coming up with ways to try and still provide support to your students even with that lack of funding, or is it just kind of up in the air right now?
I mean, I don't know. Hi, Griffith. It's nice to see you. Nice to see another Humboldt County person here. I don't know what you know about school funding, but we are always underfunded. And so this grant was providing these vital services. They will just go away. That's what's going to happen, is that our students just simply won't have access to these mental health supports at school. And like Angie talked about earlier, what that's going to mean for them is that they're on waiting lists, that they may or may not get in to see anybody when they need somebody, that, you know, in a crisis situation, there's not necessarily going to be somebody available for them. And more importantly, that even if they do get access to service, it's not going to be somebody they know and trust who they see every single day while they're at school. So no, there's no plan B. We don't have the funding to provide this level of support without this grant.
Okay, thank you.
I'll also just jump into Trinidad Rancheria. One doesn't have a school. Trinidad has a school. The town of Trinidad has a school. But Trinidad Rancheria Social Services is always looking for funding to expand our mental health program. We do. We're hitting it pretty hard right now to look for additional funding to be able to hire additional staff to maybe go into schools, but you know, with the big beautiful bill, all of our funding next year is going to get hit pretty hard. All of the grants are being cut, and so we're struggling to just figure out how to keep our other grants afloat as well, to keep the two staff that we have. So we're always looking for other funding, but I think social services in general is getting hit pretty hard.
I'd like to just pick up on something also that Julie said, which is that one of the things this grant funding was going to enable, right, was not only just the presence of more mental health providers in schools, but also mental health providers who could then expand capacity across the schools by, giving teachers an understanding of the challenges their students are facing. Obviously, we're not asking teachers to be mental health providers, but when you're a teacher and you have no idea how to recognize a student in crisis and you have no idea how to serve that student, you're not going to be as effective a teacher as you could be. And so one of the critical features of this was allowing these mental health professionals to also train teachers, right? To also build capacity amongst teachers to ensure that, when a student is in crisis or when a student is facing these mental health issues, they're not just excluded from the classroom, they're not expelled, they're not forced into special education if they don't need to be in special education. And that is another sort of capacity building, another set of trainings that is just going away. And that is, again, another multiplier of this harm. Okay, Robert.
Robert Chalice with the Time Standard here in Eureka. It's nice to see everyone this morning. I had a question about in 2019, which seems like a long time ago in a lot of respects, but I think it's very present in the memory of community members. There was a tragic suicide on the campus of McKinleyville High School. And I was curious as to sort of how that recent tragedy has sort of shaped the community's investments in mental health and how it has driven home the sort of life and death stakes that we're dealing with when we're talking about students' mental health care.
Thanks, Robert. Yes, it doesn't feel very long ago. It feels like it happened yesterday. I think, those solidify our belief and our knowledge that this is the kind of service kids need. Kids don't always tell you right out loud. They don't always have the words to say, I'm struggling or I'm suffering or I'm considering harming myself. And so school is this place where teachers and staff know our kids and are communicating with our kids all the time and are noticing the small signs. And, when you're in a classroom full of 30 kids, you might notice those small signs, but not necessarily have the skill set or the time to dig in. But when we have these mental health supports on campus, and as a teacher, I can call somebody and say, hey, I think this kid is really having a hard time. Can you check in with them? Can we make sure they get this extra support right now? That is when our systems work. That's when we can feel like we're really addressing the needs of the whole child and hopefully preventing something like what happened at McKinleyville High School in 2019 from happening again.
I would just add to that another role of mental health services providers at school is in the wake of tragedies like that, right? Like, so ideally, right, having mental health providers at school would help you avert those tragedies in the first place, right? Prevent them from happening. But to the extent that they do happen, also having mental health providers at school allows the school to respond, right, and the school community to respond in a way that supports all of the other students because it is a traumatic event, right, to have a suicide at your school. And I think so on the front and back end, that example just shows how necessary mental health providers are and the kinds of harms that are inflicted by not having anyone qualified to do that at school. These providers become the most trusted people in students' lives, just like the teachers are the most trusted people in students' lives. And so it is no small thing to take them away from students who would otherwise just not have access to those adults at all. And that is why I think both Angela and Julie have emphasized the life and death stakes of this, because this is really a life-altering change for students going through sort of critical, pivotal moments in their socio-emotional development, right, in their education. You don't get to rewind from here. Are there other questions? And if you don't think of a question now, but would like to follow up with one of us later, I know that myself, Julie, Angie would all be happy to answer additional questions. You can go through our folks at Rise. So we have Ian, Alex, Maria on this call. So whoever invited you to this call, you can reach out to them and they can put you in touch with one of us for follow-up questions. We really appreciate you being here today. As you have heard from us, I don't think the stakes could be any higher. And what we're really looking at is a government that is just letting these kids fall by the wayside, letting this whole community fall by the wayside. And it's a harm that we really hope to be able to redress through this lawsuit. So barring any other questions, thank you. Please be in touch and have a good rest of your day.